Hi, everyone. Real pleasure to be on. Real honor to be supporting this webinar with this great panel that we have today. My name is Ranjit Jose. I'm one of the co-founders and the CMO of Hyphen. We have a great panel for you to discuss this great topic. William Tincup, as many of you might know him, he is unfortunately delayed a little bit, so he should be on in a few minutes. But in the meantime, I will let Rupesh Nair and Deborah Kesselbaum introduce themselves. Rupesh?
Thanks, Ranjit. This is Rupesh Nair. I'm the president and CEO of Hotis. Hotis is an omni-channel employer brand agency which focuses on creating measurable results for our clients by redefining how their brands connect with talent. And really excited to share my insights with you guys.
And Deborah?
My name is Deborah Kestenbaum, and I'm the Chief People Officer at Hotis. And prior to joining Hotis, I was a client of Hotis's, so I've been able to experience them from both sides.
Great. So Hyphen is a startup that's been around for a little bit of time, and obviously we're in the employee engagement space. But when we talk to a lot of our customers, companies that talk to us, and so on and so forth, it's very clear that there are some companies that really have started realizing the importance of employee engagement. It is a very hot topic. It is something that pretty much everybody in the human resource space, but more importantly, among company leadership and executives are always talking about. And so from that perspective, we thought it was very timely to have this webinar where we really wanted to explore with some folks who have a great amount of experience. And we've talked to Rupesh and Deborah for a while now, and they're people who really think about this very deeply. We thought, why don't we have a webinar where we actually really explore this topic and think through, well, why should people really care about employee engagement? Why is it so important, especially in this day and age? And then once we explore that, think about, okay, now that we know why it's important, what are the strategies, tactics, and lessons that we can learn from experiences our panelists have had in terms of how do you go about employee engagement, and how do you go about ensuring that your people feel engaged? And then finally, obviously, from a company perspective, when you think about investing or going down a direction of a particular effort, it is always important to sort of think through the context of, well, does this really help my business? Obviously, from a business perspective, it is the most important question that needs to be answered. So from that perspective, we thought it would be great to think through a few different ways of how you can think about employee engagement from a business case perspective, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about it. So this is the high-level agenda for today. At a high level, we'll explore the broad topic of employee engagement. We'll go through a little bit of the strategies and tactics that different companies tackle. And then finally, we'll think through how can you think about employee engagement from a business case perspective. So, Andrew, I'll let you take over here for our first poll.
Thank you so much, Ranjit. So, HCI members, I mentioned we are going to be taking these real-time polling questions. So here is our first opportunity to get a sense of what's going on with you at your organization. So what are the biggest challenges that you are currently facing with employee engagement? And if you could just choose from the following 4 options: how do I assess engagement effectively? How do I simplify the process? How do I target the needs of different employees? Or how do I get senior management's commitment? So of these 4 options, which of them are the biggest challenges that you're currently facing? So let's take a look at some of the results as they come in. Simplifying the process or targeting the needs of different employee populations. Obviously, validity and effective assessment is a pretty tried and true employee engagement sort of survey challenge. And of course, senior management's buy-in, I think, is also equally important. So as these results are coming in, I'm just going to ask our panelists to sort of weigh in and see if this is something that resonates or rings true with you, as you see that most of our folks on the call are leaning towards the camp of making sure that senior management understands that this is that this is integral, that this is an important challenge for organization wide. So, do you find that to be to ring true when it comes to your own experiences?
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. This is Rupesh, and if you think about it, I'm not surprised at all that you're seeing that the how do I get senior management buy-in and input into kind of driving employee engagement is one of the biggest percentages there, especially considering that sometimes, frankly, in many organizations, employee engagement is an afterthought. If people are very focused on revenues and goals and targets and things like that, and it is very important, but it's very important for us to be able to kind of relate to the senior management around how this engagement impacts the different metrics inside the organization, whether it is the impact on revenue, to impact on the talent acquisition process, to impact on the quality of the work you're creating. And obviously, we'll talk much more in detail around some of the tactics here. But I'm not surprised here that it's one of the top concerns for the folks in the webinar.
Yeah. So clearly, in my current role, I'm lucky that I don't have that problem anymore because senior management's extremely bought in. But in my past life, although I would have wanted to answer all of the above on those issues, I agree that having that senior management buy-in is critical because even once you do the assessment correctly, if you have a simple process and get the right needs, in order to implement change effectively, you need that senior management buy-in for it to have an impact. So
yeah, and even the second aspect, that great point out there, and even the second aspect which I see here, which is how do you target the different employees? Because again, it's very important for us to understand, and we have seen this in our work, working with multiple clients in retail and financial services and healthcare and all the other industries, is kind of the different employees have different needs. So the way you talk to an engineer in your organization who is at a senior level would be different from where you talk to your customer service rep, whose priorities and whose needs might be different. So, and we think about it a lot, and frankly, that's where the personalization aspect comes in the context of employee engagement, and understanding that there are these different pockets in the organization which might have different ways of thinking about the problem, and that's where I think some of the solutions like Hyphen can be very effective around kind of getting into understanding how the different parts of the organizations are thinking differently. And again, not a surprise to me that that's the second big question in people's mind here.
Yeah. Hey, Andrew, this is Ranjit. I just wanted to add to that. Great points from Rupesh and Deborah. From our perspective, also, we always see the question of how do you justify employee engagement to be a big factor. But to add to Rupesh's point, it is important to think about different departments and different sort of groups of employees, but also it's important to think about different generations and different groups of employees from that perspective. So how do you engage millennials is especially something we hear a lot, and that's something we'll definitely be touching upon as we go through this presentation today. But this is a great segue to one of these studies that we recently found, which is that McKinsey and the Conference Board have been doing this survey, and 3 years in a row they've figured out, or they've seen, that CEOs have been rating human capital as their top challenge. As companies move to become increasingly sort of people-oriented companies, service-oriented companies, your human capital is the most important aspect of your company. And so, Rupesh, maybe I'll kick it off with you being the CEO of Hodis. How do you see this, sort of play out in your own company and your experience?
Yeah, and Ranjit, I have two perspectives here. One as the CEO of Hodis, which is an organization which was going through a major transformation in brand and getting to kind of redefine ourselves to be more of the forward-thinking organization, which kind of uses the mixture of technology, creative strategy, and kind of drives the value for our clients. And in that process of transformation, basically the pain points we faced around kind of how do we get employees aligned on on the thought process of the organization and the vision of the organization, which was really well validated by our clients and analysts. But how do we get our employees aligned to that, and how do we then ensure that it's constantly being kind of understood? And that's where I think the employee engagement aspect was very key for us, especially in the last 1.5 years, where we had to jump in and kind of understand enough level of detail as to how people are interacting with the change management process, interacting with how they understood the vision, how they understood the tools involved in enabling the vision, how they are engaging in ensuring that we are getting more of the right talent into the organization, and will they be willing to support our organization and be advocates for the organization. So, it was very important. And, I as CEO believe that, if anything can stop us from achieving our goals, it is human capital. And then the other aspect I think about is from a perspective of the clients we work with, right? So again, one of the things we're seeing, especially in this, what I call as the always on world, where people are very connected and they are making decisions on the fly because they have their mobiles, they have their social media, they have all sorts of connectivity to the entire world. It's very easy for a disengaged employee to go figure out, the next opportunity they need to jump into. And there's all sorts of tactics being used by different organizations to ensure that that basically they can tap into this the talent capital. And the truth is that kind of thinking about it from a perspective of how to ensure that I can understand how the employees feel is super critical in ensuring that you can retain the employees, and also in some cases use your employees to be the source of new employees, right? Engaged employees drive more engaged employees into the company, which kind of becomes, in our experience, which has been a top source of talent acquisition for many of our clients too. So and then again, obviously, it drives quality inside the organization, not just about getting the people inside the organization, but also kind of getting the right people with the right alignment to the culture of the organization. And hence, engaged employees kind of the best source of that that need which a company has.
Great points. So Deborah, in your different roles, as VP of HR at Chubb, now Chief People Officer at Hoods, do you see? A little bit of what Rupesh is talking about, where a big part of employee engagement is actually the result where when you have engaged employees, they're helping you sort of A, with retention, but B, more importantly, attract many of their connections. Is that something that you see as like a great value that comes out of employee engagement?
Absolutely. I think on a larger scale, the importance of human capital and employee engagement in our current industry space and marketplace, so much of our business is about people and about, intellectual capital and what people bring. We're not doing as much actually just, manufacturing widgets. So the quality of the talent we have and their interest in delivering amazing results is more critical than ever to reach business success. In terms of, engagement and the virtuous cycle of engaged employees, helping to attract more engaged employees, absolutely. I think, when you look at your talent acquisition data, generally the most effective and a large source of attracting talent is employee referrals. And so the more you can leverage that, the better. So absolutely.
Yeah. And just to add on to Deb's point, Ranjit here, traditionally employee referral has been a big source of hire, obviously, but there's an aspect which is obviously rising with the whole aspect of social media, where the whole employee influence, or what we call as talent advocates, is playing a significant role, right? So an engaged employee becomes a huge advocate, not just to basically your talent acquisition process, but also to your brand. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of amplify. So there's the whole impact of I can refer employees and I can refer candidates into the pipeline, but an engaged employee becomes an advocate from two perspectives. One from, hey, they influence, just like the whole word of mouth, which was around when social media was not around. You're talking to someone and saying, oh, there's a great opportunity, but the whole amplification of that word of mouth in form of social media and talent advocacy is playing a significant role in talent acquisition. And then also the same approach is playing a significant role for a lot of our clients in kind of growing their brand awareness and being in top of mind for their customers also.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, from the topic of employee engagement being really important in other aspects of a company, we've seen lots of recent studies about how engaged employees can really move the needle on innovation, growth, and revenue of a company. We've seen how, in studies, companies with engaged employees tend to be more innovative. We've seen studies about how, when you compare companies with higher levels of engaged employees, the revenue per employee numbers tend to be much higher. Wanted to get, Rupesh, your perspective in terms of, how do you think about this? Is there a framework where you're able to put together the question of, when I have highly engaged employees, this is, some of the business results that I can actually drive out of that?
Yeah, and I think the most quantifiable, frankly, is what I call as revenue per employee. And the truth is that, it is difficult to measure. It's easy to state that, the impact is on revenue per employee. It's difficult to measure, I understand. But if we put the right process in place to ensure that we are measuring to that, and the irony and the issue here is that it's not just the engagement, but a lot of other factors which play into that whole revenue per employee. But when we have done it effectively, for example, we measure revenue per employee for a pretty large healthcare organization, which is global. And what we have seen is a lot of the effort on kind of doing. So when we look at employee engagement, obviously there's aspects you need to think about in how do you engage the employees you already have in the company. And there's aspects also you need to think about how do you engage candidates who are potential candidates for basically your company. And actually, obviously, employer brand kind of plays a significant role in ensuring that all of this is really connected, if you think about it, right? That's the context in which you think about what is the culture and what is the basic, key value proposition which basically the employees should have when they look at my company, and how do I then build the internal and external approaches of driving and ensuring that that aspect is understood and that drives engagement from both perspectives. And when we have done that effectively in organizations, we have been able to kind of, evaluate as to what is the revenue per employee. And we have been able to demonstrate even up to the C levels in many Fortune 500 organizations as to the impact of the employer branding and the impact of the employee engagement efforts at the revenue per employee level. Obviously, then, some of it from an innovation perspective, engaged employees, are kind of going to drive things on their own and not depend on, X, Y, Z to come in and tell them what to do, which is a big factor, because the truth is that, what I've seen in my experience, and again, working with my clients, is that devil is a lot of the times in the details. So as a leader, you can kind of go in and talk about the great vision, some of the aspects on tactical organizational structures and ensuring that your culture is set up, and a lot of the other pieces, hire the right managers. But then since the devil is in the details, if you empower your employees and if you keep them engaged, the rate at which the innovation happens is significantly more. And I saw that in the last 1 year at Otis, for example. We set the vision, and then we step back. We ensured that the employees are engaged and, are bought into that whole paradigm we set up, and then let the innovation drive inside the organization. So I think it's a very, very valid statement out there, and completely support that thought process.
If I could just build on that a little bit, Rupesh, that another element, going back to what you said earlier about the personas, and providing the empowerment and the communication and the leadership is all critical. But then one other element is sort of the open two-way communication and really taking time to get to know your various employees, because everybody's engaged in a unique way. And so I think another aspect that, you've been able to bring to HODIS is this open communication, so people can express what they're passionate about and we can meet their individual needs, which further enhances their engagement.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, thanks to Hyphen for providing the platform for us to be able to kind of have that conversation. Ranjit, you might want to add on some aspects there.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, those are all great points. I mean, I think something we've heard, in terms of correlating engaged employees with higher levels of innovation, growth, and revenue is definitely the whole notion of open communications, which both of you touched upon, which we see HODIS use very effectively. But I think what comes out of that is also great teamwork. I think what we've seen in lots of conversations, studies that we've researched, is that engaged employees tend to sort of be great team players. They sort of give rise to great teams within organizations. And in the end, I would say business is a team sport. And from that perspective, I think there is a great correlation between engaged employees, great teams, resulting in great innovation, growth, and revenue. Moving on, one of the things that I want to sort of bring up with the audience is something interesting about employee engagement across the world. When we initially started looking at employee engagement as a big problem here within the U.S., we were quite surprised to see that this was actually something that is not prevalent in the U.S. only. It is actually something that is prevalent worldwide. Rupesh, I know that HODIS is a global company. Any tidbits or any sort of observations that you've had when you think about employee engagement from an international perspective?
Yeah, I think, as I said, the problems are pretty similar. The nature of the problem is pretty similar, but kind of thinking about those personas as you think about engagement and ensuring that you appreciate the fact that there are those pockets of inside the organizations, which needs to be treated differently from an engagement perspective. There are cultural aspects which needs to be thought through, right? For example, some parts of the world, value, the family aspect of companies. In some parts of the world, they value more of I have the ability to create an impact. So kind of keeping that in mind has been, frankly, very, very, very important for us, at least as HODIS. But I think one thing which I've seen, at least in my experience in the global organization, is the fact that it is very important to tie all these pieces together in the form of having a solid cultural background and having a common theme around what the employer brand is, and ensuring that we can basically drive engagement towards that, what we call as the organizing idea behind why I would work at the company, and then ensuring that all the other engagement aspects is kind of driven by that in the more what I call as global form, which is having a global thought process on what is the high-level framework to run engagement, but then ensuring that you're considering all those local aspects while you drive the engagement strategies and execute that engagement strategy in those local regions.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit more on the specifics. I'm sure this is something that our audience is extremely interested in. I've seen many of these warning signs at various companies that I've been in the past, but I want to get both of your thoughts on how do you really think about looking for signs of disengagement. I mean, these are some of the top things that we were able to see in our research, in our conversations with our customers and companies that talk to us. But from your own perspective, Rupesh and Deborah, are there particular warning signs that you look for? Do any of these sort of really resonate with you?
I'll take that first. I think the items listed there definitely resonate, but even from it's almost palpable. Sometimes you can feel in a room whether there's fun and a light air and a collaborative, energetic air, or when you're starting to see employees less engaged, there's sort of this tension, or you can just sort of feel the energy in the room as well, or on the phone call or whatever it is. So I think it's possible to even sense it and to just, see how employees are interacting with one another and engaging in the work at hand. It becomes pretty evident how engaged they are. And it could just be a specific task they're less engaged in, and then you'd want to explore, is that a broader problem or is it a more localized problem?
Yeah, and to add on to that, right, if you basically are not getting any questions in your, as CEO, I stand, and if I'm not getting any questions as part of the all-hands call, that means my employees are not engaged, because it is it is kind of as simple as thinking about it from a perspective of it is no noise or no feedback is actually a bad thing. I would rather have feedback about what are the issues inside the organization and kind of drive towards fixing that. And for that, it kind of is driven both ways, right? You have to be engaged as an employer, and as Deb mentioned, kind of drive towards understanding your organization and reacting to the different engagement channels which are available inside the organization. Otherwise, the employees will not engage back with you. But then also some of the warning signs, if you think about it, is just the fact that you're not getting enough feedback for the direction you're setting the company on, or for any changes you're trying to make inside the company. And then you're actually hearing through the grapevine feedback which you didn't necessarily get through direct channels, and you're not able to react to those on a timely basis. And I think that's the biggest warning signal that the employee engagement is not working inside an organization. And then I think it is kind of, needs to be driven both ways, where if we see those signs inside an organization, how do we as leaders as organizations jump in and address it head on? And it's like when I think about it, it's like kind of figuring out a physician kind of trying to diagnose issues, right? You need to first understand what the problem is. And if you cannot understand that, that doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist. It exists, and it's probably creating a rot somewhere, and you not knowing it creates a bigger issue than you knowing it and then working towards fixing it.
Yeah, great insight. Yeah, so the couple of things I would add is that I think the first couple are the ones that resonate with me the most. Especially from some of my past experiences where I have actually seen definite sort of disconnect, or employees feeling disengaged when they're just sort of working on their own small project, not necessarily seeing how does that really connect with the larger purpose of the company or the larger mission of the company. But that really also, I think, results out of employees not feeling that they can speak up. And I think to Rupesh's point, if you are able to have those mechanisms where you're able to really hear from people and people feel free to be able to have those open conversations, I think what you get out of that is people really having those conversations, realizing the impact on the big picture, and being able to see how their work will impact the company. Moving on. So, given the fact that we've explored now, the importance of employee engagement, and what are some of the top warning signs to look for, let's actually talk through what are some of the strategies and tactics that companies can use to actually start to impact employee engagement. And Andrew, I'll let you take over at this point.
Absolutely. So HCI members, again, this was our polling question. So let's go straight to the results and take a look at what we're saying here. So what does improve employee engagement at work? And this is the opinion of our members on the call today. So again, I'll draw your attention to it. If you've yet to vote, it's still open. It will remain open. So go ahead and type in your responses. Click the check the box that most applies to your own organization. But by and large, most of us are saying that a culture of open communication is a big driver for improving employee engagement, followed by individual development in terms of leadership development skills, and then opportunities for your career. So sort of individual advancement as well. So I think these are things that aren't entirely surprising from the HCI perspective, that that development is a key driver. That open communication, that transparency, and that trust is so critical, I think, and it's very much reflected in the responses of our members. So I'll throw these results to our panel for some commentary. Does this mesh with what you've seen, Rupesh?
Yeah, and I'm smiling looking at this because that's what we have been driving inside, my organization in the last year and a half, and it's very interesting to see that everyone believes similarly around the whole idea of ensuring that there's an open communication, and I believe that it is driven top down, right? How you as a CEO, how you as a senior manager in the organization kind of behave in your communication with the employees is critical to kind of how you drive that open communication culture. So a great example is, we have these channels inside of our company, driven, by the hyper technology where I get to see, impact of, if you think about it, certain communications. And I get to jump into that conversations and provide my open opinion on what I believe is the core of the issue, which then kind of starts follow-on conversations and clarifications and whatnot. And it basically really drives engagement, because if I look at it, that means, it starts with at a point where sometimes people don't agree with a certain aspect, but if you have that open communication, you get that opportunity to clarify some of the details which are involved in there. And obviously, the openness is a huge aspect of kind of how you drive that, and that automatically kind of starts getting people the trust they need to build in the organization, and hence drives more employee engagement. And again, I think a lot of the other points out here around developing the people managers and leaders, and if you have that open communication inside the organization, you'll automatically kind of start driving a lot of those next level items I see out there, whether it's developing the right level of leaders, or whether it is kind of having open conversations with people around their own career goals, and ensuring that we are career pathing their long-term career paths, and ensuring that it's aligned with what the company believes is the overall goal of the company is. Now, one aspect, and it's probably because of the way the poll was structured, because one of the aspects I believe is equally important in the engagement aspect is about kind of how you create that single story which resonates to everyone inside that company. That it's the whole aspect of having an organizing idea around why I come to work every day and why I should impact this organization, and it's basically different, as you mentioned before, in different parts of the organization. There's probably a company level that key value proposition of why I should work at a company, and then there are different layers you would add on top of it at a department level, at a region level, at a specific job title level, which then helps us drive and to understand what matters the most to the employee inside the company, and then drive the engagement based on some of that. But yeah, I'm pretty much not surprised with the results of the poll here.
If I could just add on one quick point to that. I mean, I agree 100%, Rupesh, with what you just said about that opening communication then enables all those other items. But I want to take us back to where we started our first poll about senior management buy-in, and connect that to the open communication, because you hear in the way Rupesh talks, he supports this notion of open communication and welcomes the feedback and is willing to iterate with people and maybe even readjust an opinion or a direction, which further builds engagement from people because they feel like they have the opportunity to influence and contribute. So that participation and buy-in from senior leadership is once again highlighted as very critical.
Yeah, I completely agree. Great points from both of you. I mean, one of the things I think in talking to many of the companies is that this is actually a challenge that which pretty much every company faces, because typically when you talk to companies that are startups, I think they very rarely, if you're below, let's say, 20 employees, very rarely do you see the challenge of open communication be a big issue. But as Rupesh said, as you have larger and larger companies, as you have different departments, as you have different layers of management, I think it becomes increasingly difficult for you to create that or ensure that culture of open communication stays in there. And then I think to Rupesh's point, also to have like a central organizing principle around, the mission of the company, the vision of the company, and so on and so forth, and ensuring that, that is, continuously sort of reinforced becomes, a big factor. So great points from both of you.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead, Rupesh.
No, Ranjit, and one add-on point there is it's great to have a vision and all those aspects of the company, but I think it is very important for us to be able to translate that into what does it mean for me? Because it's always, I mean, everyone in the world is, it's all about, what does it mean for me and how is it impacting me inside this organization and kind of being able to translate that into that, that key value proposition or the employee value proposition for the employees and ensuring that the vision is connected to that and then having those engagement principles around that, I think is very critical because some people leave the vision and mission at a very fluffy level, which sometimes is not useful, right? And kind of converting it into what does it mean for me is very important.
Great point. So yeah, I want to just also spend a little bit of time, talk about this great some research from Bain & Company and HBR. But this is, again, another layer of being able to see how do you go beyond employee engagement? How do you think about, from the basic level of, what are the core needs of satisfied employees? And then looking at, okay, well, now what are the ways in terms of how you can think about engaged employees? And then one level up is, how do you get to inspired employees? Actually, going back to some of Rupesh's point, where you actually have employees evangelize in your company to both customers, prospects, and other sort of people who can become employees in the future. And as you can see, they also have great numbers in terms of how you can start thinking about how does this really start to affect productivity of the company. As you can see, inspired employees obviously produce the highest level of productivity. I mean, does this sort of ring true at all for you, Rupesh? Does this sort of is something that you see at HODIS or any of your customers?
Yeah, I think I can talk most about what I see at HODIS, frankly, especially this whole that hockey stick effect, as you would think about, right? And when you have frankly, when I took over running the company about a year and a half ago, we went through multiple changes, and our organization was in a situation where there was frankly lack of trust on the organization and direction of the organization and the satisfaction level of the employees, and we saw direct impact to basically the output and the level of the quality of work we delivered and the quality of the product which we created. So and obviously it took a little bit of work to ensure that we kind of cover that whole hockey stick effect, as I would say. Obviously, there's a lot of work which goes into thinking about the vision and the culture and all the aspects of the organization and aligned to ensure that it works with the people inside the organization. But then once you develop that and once you get your employees engaged and turn them into inspired employees, which I believe we got a lot of it achieved in the last year and a half, frankly, and we've seen direct impact to basically impact our customers. We have in the last year and a half we have had basically no customer the retention problem, specifically because our employees are excited about the work they do and the impact they create. They're actually having that impact on our customers, and also the quality of the work which we're seeing and the output we're getting from the employees is just amazing. So that whole aspect of inspired employees drive, I know there are some numbers here, but I actually believe those are actually, some of those are probably not as measurable, and hence the impact of inspired employees is actually, more of a 10x nature rather than basically the numbers we see here, because frankly, some of that cannot be measured as easily. But if I just look at it as top down as a CEO and think about the impact inside the organization, HODIS, as an example, I see that impact over the last year and a half, and I see how we are able to kind of create that 10x impact by having those inspired employees in the company.
Great. So again, moving on to some of the things our audience might be extremely interested in. We talked a little bit about signs of disengaged employees. This is something we see at many of our customers, and a lot of research out there points this out. How do you look for signs of engaged employees? In the poll, it clearly came through. Communication is a big aspect. Being able to communicate across the company openly and honestly is something that comes through very loudly and clearly in the research, came through very well in the poll that we just had. Rupesh and Deborah, from your perspective, when you look at your teams, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I think, again, we kind of covered that a little bit during the poll, frankly. I mean, it is very evident based on, sometimes it starts with as soon as you do something inside the organization, you see, communication going across the organization, a lot of chatter happening inside the organization, and which kind of is a good sign, right? Because you don't want to do something inside an organization which is not necessarily going to drive the direction in the right way. And so when I look at my organization and I see when I make a change inside the organization, when we launch a new product or talk about an integrated vision or addition to a vision, the amount of feedback I get from the employees quickly is, I think, a big sign of engagement, other than obviously the items you see here, which is about taking initiative and an impact to the goals and expectations. But I think we can measure some of the engagement, which are some of the output, the feedback which managers get from their employees as a big sign. And it might be incremental, growth feedback, right? That, hey, this doesn't make sense. And the employees might be as blunt with you as that, but you would rather get that than not have an engaged employee and then be able to make changes inside the organization based on that feedback which you receive from the employee, if it makes sense, or clarify some additional points so that they can understand the direction in which you're taking the company, or direction in which you're taking your department, or direction in which you're taking your track of work, depending upon what level you're talking about here.
Great point. Moving on from tactics and strategies perspective, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts. We talked a little bit about inspired leadership and how that can make a big difference. We've talked a little bit about how you can over communicate vertically and horizontally. We've talked about how communication is extremely important from an engaged perspective. Feedback mechanisms. I mean, these are some of the things that we've seen with our customers be extremely effective. We've seen this in research out there. Again, Rupesh and Deborah, any particular tactics and strategies that you've seen in the past work really well for you from an employee engagement perspective?
And go ahead, Deb. Why don't you get started?
Well, I was gonna of the ones listed there, the aligning culture and actions, I think is a really important one, and it links to something else that comes to mind for me around authenticity. So, it's not enough to just say the right things, but you need leadership and throughout the organization to demonstrate those behaviors. And as you pointed out, in smaller organizations, it's a little easier to do that. But I've also been part of a lot of very large organizations, and in the places where leadership really walks the talk, demonstrates the behavior, engages in open conversation, you're going to make more traction and build engagement more effectively.
Yeah, and to add on to that, right? I think there's a whole process to how you drive employee engagement, because I think, again, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning. It's about kind of how you look at this employee engagement problems or opportunity, as I would call it, from both external and internal perspectives. So if I look at a process and a strategy to kind of think about employee engagement, I think you need to have a framework which basically thinks about the end-to-end life cycle of the talent, right from the time you attract the right person to ensure that you're kind of driving them through the right sourcing techniques to ensure that you get the right person excited about the job they are trying to do. And then as you nurture them through the process, and as you kind of get them excited about the brand or the company and the opportunities out there, ensuring that you have that consistent impact you can create the organization, or impact this organization can create to you message, and then that same and have an engaged candidate pool, which then kind of drives towards an engaged employee pool, frankly, because it's all related. Because when you think about getting people into an organization, you need to ensure that, I think typically what I've seen is when you are a company which is 30 to 40 people or 50 people in size, it's very easy to get an engaged set of employees. And as long as the right leadership and they have the right intent, it's easy to get an engaged employee. But as you start scaling, that's when the problem happens, because you are like hiring all types of people, bringing in the right, all sorts of, employees to ensure that you can drive the growth of the company. And at that point, you start getting to a point in the life cycle of an organization where you kind of, sometimes, need to kind of hire fast. And I think having that whole aspect of, ensuring that you have that core team, which basically then helps us ensure that you get the right employees, to then help us ensure that we are connecting to those employees in the right ways while they're inside the organization, giving them the right career opportunities, giving them the right reasons to be at work, giving them the right environment and right team to ensure that they're happy with the family they're working with or with the company they're working with. It all is connected. So, and I've seen that with a lot of the work we have done with our clients around how that connected thinking of taking things from all the way from the sourcing cycle to being an engaged employee and then driving more of that cycle is a huge, aspect of kind of having a framework on employee engagement and ensure that you can drive it systematically than necessarily kind of in a very haphazard manner.
Okay. So moving on to thinking about employee engagement more from a business case perspective, we've already talked about some of the clear business value that employee engagement can bring, but something that we thought we'd actually look at it. How do you think about employee engagement from the context of actually justifying the value to senior management, justifying the value within the company, and so forth? But before we do that, I'll let Andrew take over on this call. Andrew?
Certainly. So as we wrap up the webcast, we want to hear from you, HCI members. Tell us a little bit about some of the ROI, tangible benefits of higher engagement. So how does higher engagement help your organization the most? Does it improve the bottom line? Does it allow more collaboration between employees? Is it helping with attrition and reduces burnout? Or is it a performance driver primarily? So let's take a look at where we fall within this spectrum, and we'll take a look and see. Obviously, we'll wait for some more results to come in, but I think it's really a good question, one in which really we have to think about when we're designing our engagement surveys, or when we're thinking about ways in which we're going to measure and capture engagement data. What are we really going after for? And so I think as we look, and most of us on the call are weighing in on its clear correlation with employee performance. But again, I love the thoughts from our colleagues at HODIS. If you guys could weigh in a little bit as you see these results come in, if this is similar to your own beliefs on employee engagement outcomes.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised, frankly, to see not seeing a larger percentage on turnover and kind of the attrition aspects, frankly. I think the employee performance I'm not surprised by the fact that it's the highest voted category, but I do feel like there's a huge impact on retention of having engaged employees, and then which eventually has impact on ensuring that you can hire the right people too, because the retained employee who are engaged kind of impacts that. So I would have expected some of that in the metrics here, frankly. But obviously, yeah, I agree that the piece which is most important is how the performance of the employee skyrockets if you have an engaged employee.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that improves the bottom line wasn't higher, because frankly, I view doing these other things, increasing performance, reducing turnout, increasing collaboration, is going to ultimately drive your bottom line, get you better results, reduce your costs, and get better results. So, which probably a good segue to the next few slides.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's a great point from you, Deborah. I think that's some of the things where I think a lot more people are starting to connect the dots, where improving the employee performance does lead to some of those business results. Again, the Gallup study, which shows the total overall lost productivity in terms of, a pretty large number of $450 billion. But when you really start to dig into the details, I mean, these are, aspects of profitability, productivity, customer satisfaction, all of these impacted by employee engagement. But to really think about, from a business case perspective, I won't spend too much time here. We'll actually be sending you a template that you can download from Hyphen where you can think about how do I go about thinking about employee engagement from a business case framework? How do I think about it from a productivity? Well, what are the numbers that I can plug in for my own company, which can really show me what are the dollar value that I can get from productivity, or what is the dollar value that I can get from retention? What is the dollar value that I can get from customer satisfaction increase? And what is the dollar value that I can get from reduced absenteeism? So these are things that, different ways for you to think about how to think about business case for employee engagement, and we'll have that available for you to download at Hyphen. With that,
sorry, if I could just add that going back to that first slide about gaining senior management buy-in, if you can present the business case in the context of how it impacts the bottom line, you'll be speaking their language a little bit more and hopefully have better chance of influencing their commitment.
Yeah, Ranjit, this is William. I think one of the things that for HR professionals is that they've evolved, the audience has evolved. Now you have employees that expect to be engaged. You have employers that expect to be engaged. I think the thing is if they ever run into someone that just doesn't buy it, let's just say CFO or somebody else in the organization on the board and C-suite that just doesn't get it, they need to change the conversation to customers. So just say, imagine if we didn't engage our customers in this way, how would our business do? Most people are going to get the bit. Well, you got to meet the customer where they are. You got to communicate in a way that they understand, blah, blah, blah. So if you move the conversation back over to customers and say, look at what all we do here to understand where they're at. Almost like having a finger on the pulse of the customer, right? Okay, well, why don't we do that with employees? So moving them mentally, I think that's usually the struggle, is that you run into an individual or individuals that just don't kind of get it. Like, why would we care? We're paying them. They're engaged. We give them a check every week. They should be engaged. Well, okay, that's cool. But I believe the conversation around engagement has changed to where most people expect it. So now you have employees that are entering into the workforce that expect employers to engage them, and they expect career opportunities to come next. Yeah, Rupesh?
No, it's a great point, William, and that's exact, whole nature of kind of, I think if you can starting to think about treating your employees like your customer and actually larger than your customer, I think that's the first mindset change for the senior management team, right? Because the truth is, and then change all your employee and talent strategy just like you would for basically your customer, including how you acquire your talent, how you nurture your talent, how you engage your talent. I think that creates a perfect life cycle. For talent.
Rupesh, I love that you brought it there because, quite frankly, I think that size and scale, what size and scale really does is it pushes the boundaries of our values. And as we scale, we kind of forget who we are a little bit, and we forget the values of what kind of got us there. And so I think it's important that we when you're a small company, we do it because, well, it's a part of who we are and it's our bit, etc. But as you grow, you kind of forget. It's like, well, we have this open position. We got to put somebody in. Well, Dallas is opening up. We got to have somebody there. We forget, well, we actually should be doing this qualitatively. We should be doing this the way that when we had 12 employees. And yeah, hiring slow, firing fast. But we should be communicating the way, and I love the way that you brought it all the way back to sourcing. Because the way that we communicate with them, what we typically do is we bring them up to onboarding and we drop them off and hope that everything goes well at that point. But if we carry that all the way through the relationship, we're always kind of meeting the audience where they are at that particular moment.
Yep.
Great point. So that was a very lively discussion. I think that brings us to the end and questions from the audience. And at this point, Andrew, I'll let you take over.
thank you so much. So we probably, in the interest of time, just have time for maybe one quick sort of around the horn type of question before we wrap up. So I just wanted to know if, as folks are sort of asking around on our panel, if there are any if there's any differences. One of the things that we noticed was how the challenge was to treat employees differently, and so we started to talk a little bit in the chat as I was monitoring that of the concept of really, in many respects, employee engagement is always going to be localized. It's always going to be the responsibility for the manager to be held accountable or to monitor the engagement of their employees, and so it just begs the question of who are the stakeholders who really ought to own employee engagement, and whether or not it belongs in the realm of the C-suite. Is it HR's responsibility, or is it the type of thing that ought to be embedded in a lot of different processes, all geared towards some of the core values of trust and transparency and communication. So if we could just get some final thoughts from our panelists.
Andrew, I'll take a flyer on that. I think the actual responsibility is kind of shared across everybody, but I push it down to the employee. So I think actually if you're in a company and you're not being engaged, bring it up. Bring it to the attention of whoever's around you, your manager, to HR, etc. Just bring it up. It's like, hey, I think you can get more out of me. I think I can do more. I'm struggling. Bring it up. So I do think there's a responsibility at the C-suite and in HR and in recruiting, like Rupesh brought up. But I believe that, if I were to push it onto one person, I'd push it onto employees. That is your job to be engaged.
Now, the way I would put it, William, I would support your thought process around employee eventually owns the employee engagement. But also kind of think about I think different people have different responsibilities in the whole employee engagement life cycle, if you think about it, right? As a senior management, I believe you have the responsibility to generate that open, environment of openness where an engaged employee doesn't get, penalized for being engaged, right? Or being, raising their voice and kind of creating that culture, which kind of drives top down, I believe. And then, as people success leaders or chief HR officers or whatever different organizations call that role now, basically you kind of create the tools and processes needed. So I would kind of hold, in my case, Deb accountable to ensure that there are the right tools and processes which can drive that employee engagement, which is, hey, I have a tool for anonymous communication. I have a tool for ensuring that the people can actually participate in kind of the surveys and things like that. Whatever those tools are, which can actually ensure that there is opportunities for employee to engage. And then once you have done that, monitor some of that at a manager level. Frankly, that's where some of the management, next level management kind of plays an important role on ensuring that they monitor that and react to that quickly at their own levels. But at the end of the day, it's on the employee to ensure that they speak up. If once given the opportunity and once given the reaction, because another aspect I believe is how the feedback is handled and how do you react to it and how do you change direction of the company or culture of the company or any other aspect based on that feedback is that's important. So I think there's different roles people play, but I agree with William that employees themselves play a pretty critical part in that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo that it's shared across all those groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that what's interesting is it does come back to values, because Rupesh, you landed on this place that says it kind of depends on how you react. So if you create an unsafe environment where feedback is penalized, which I don't know why you do that, but let's just say that exists. Then no one's going to raise their hand. No one's going to speak up, and so that kind of kills both innovation and it kills that feedback of then someone saying, "Hey, I need to be engaged," or "Hey, I'd like to do more," etc. But if you have values that support that, I think what I love about y'all's story is this one where you've basically reclaimed your values. and said, no, we're going to stand for this. This is who we are. This is what we, and what's nice about it is, are you in? Are you on board with who we are? And then I can't help but think that you back it up. That you back it up, because there are people watching. They're looking to see if is this, just like Deborah said, is this just something you're saying, or is this something that you actually do and you fulfill on? So I love the idea that, when people will give you feedback, even when they give you feedback you don't want to hear, maybe it hurts. They give you that feedback and you respond like, you know what? It hurts to hear that, but you know what? Let's fix it.
Yeah, and frankly, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see the impact of some of this. I mean, if I look at what we've done at HODIS, for example, the last 1.5 years, and that's actually visible if you go to the Glassdoor page of HODIS. I mean, the impact, the impact we have created using, by ensuring that we have an engaged employee suite and ensuring that we are following that, you can easily see that impact on the trend you're seeing on the Glassdoor page, on the reviews people have provided and things like that. And, just an example, I believe that it's measurable and those trends can be seen and you can react to it. And the speed at which you react is also important. You cannot wait for 5 months to react to a feedback which is provided. At least you need to ensure that you react to it pretty quickly and then talk about next steps and kind of get to that point. That's why I believe, obviously employees is important, but how you react to it as a management team, top down, is important too. And I think we're running out of time, and Andrew and Ranjit are probably looking at us, to wrap this up.
Well,
a great lively conversation.
Not fair.
No,
I want to keep talking.
You guys, we could seriously listen as literal flies on the wall to the conversation, but I do want to just wrap things up for our members who've given the time today. But a big thank you to everyone involved, all three of our panelists, and of course the folks from Hyphen for making this webcast possible. But I'll extend the biggest thank you of all to each and every one of our HCI members who've taken the time out of their day to spend with us. We thank you so much and look forward to seeing you on another webcast soon. Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody, and let's make the most of it.